Got a couple of questions for the crowd here. I see some of you are a little more seasoned like I am. So the question for you seasoned individuals, how many of you grew up in a town of less than 2,000? Okay, how many of you had more than one grocery store in your town when you grew up? A few of you. Well, I come from Litchfield, south of Valley City. And when I grew up, we had 2 grocery stores and a butcher shop. And right now, I think the center store has candy bars, and that's it. So we're really aware of how groceries has changed. And and just what Ellen said is the whole dynamic has changed. Next slide. With this dynamic, the North Dakota Association of Rural Electrics was interested to see if it was feasible in this Minot region to see if there's a new way of organizing food distribution. Next slide. So distribution is really the key to moving food around the state. And it's really changed over the years. There are major distributors that cross paths and deliver to grocery stores, schools, and all other kinds of like restaurants. But the key that we're going to talk about right here is how do you reorganize distribution? And you've all heard of redistribution or hub and spoke. It's like the airlines. The airlines have, like Delta Airlines, they've got a hub in Atlanta, one in Memphis, one in Minneapolis. And if those are snowed down, you don't go anywhere, right? So the hub and spoke method has been used in transportation. It's used in trucking. A lot of trucks have terminals. And where all the product, and look at FedEx, product goes into Memphis, even though it's come from Minneapolis, a product will go to Memphis, get reorganized, and then fly up to Target. So go figure. But the hub and spoke utilization has been used in many different types of businesses. Next slide. So we talked about Walsh County. Walsh County had an issue. The issue was the smaller stores did not have enough volume, weekly volumes, in order to attract a major distributor to stop by. The major distributors, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, usually have a minimum order quantity per week, or they won't even stop, because it's not worth their while to pay for the driver, the truck, and that type of thing. So the smaller stores were buying product from other distributors that had much higher prices. So they were actually looking at going out of business, right, Lori? I mean, they were seriously thinking about shutting down. And the folks in the area were alarmed at that. So we did a study, and we took a look at the population in the Walsh County. We found out that the major store, the Jim Super Value in Park River, was doing well. But Diana Hahn, who owns, she and her husband own the store, were actually big rural economic development promoters. And they were willing to take on the task of taking a look at being a hub store. In other words, a distributor could drop off each store's product once a week and have it redistributed through the co-op's little truck, and they would drop off the product to the stores that originally could not meet the volume. So the big distributor loves that. So instead of having 4 or 5 drops, they could drop it off at one store. Each pallet goes to the individual stores. They throw it on a truck. and deliver it to the stores. And the stores now don't have the fear of going out of business because they can't get product. So, and then also their prices lowered, their cost of goods lowered. And then they found out that the schools and the healthcare facilities in the area were interested in having distribution as well. Because in the past, the schools and other organizations would have to have a staff member go to the grocery store and buy stuff, taking time to do that. Now they could just order online from the co-op, from the grocery store, and that truck will stop at the schools and the healthcare. So what's been happening is it's been expanded, and it's expanded to the point where now they bought a new truck, they bought a new van, and so that hub and spoke model worked very well here to keep those smaller stores from going out of business. And the smaller, as Ellen pointed out, the smaller stores had increased in profitability. And so now they're viable and they're in business. So so now we're took a look at this model and we're thinking, does that apply to this region right around here? Okay, next slide. So this is just another diagram how the schools purchase through the stores, and then the orders go to their distributor, and then the products get delivered to the schools. Next slide. So in North Dakota, there are basically 4 broadline distributors in North Dakota. And by broadline, they're big multinational companies. And these stores, generally, if you're a grocery store, you sign up with them, you sign a contract, a multi-year contract with them. And then they supply your product wholesale to the store. They usually drop off once or twice a week. So these are the 4 that are actively involved here. Next slide. So the broadline distributors, they have up to 30,000 products in their warehouse. Pretty amazing. It's just all kinds of things, not just food, but toenail clippers and all kinds of fun stuff. And then for example, all the stores in the state have common pricing of those broadline distributors, but they also offer a full range of other services. Advertising services, they'll charge freight, they can operate your computer, they give you pricing mechanisms, so there's a lot of services that they provide where they make extra money on their product. They, like I said, the big thing is they require a multi-year contract with if you're a grocery store. And but the kicker here is they require minimum volume purchases. So it might be as much as $10 or $20 or $25,000 a week that you have to buy from them in order to have them stop. So, and even some of the other distributors have the same stuff, especially distributors. Next slide. Any questions though? If anybody has questions and saying, well, yes, go ahead.
When you say they deliver to nursing homes and schools like that,
yeah,
is that billed directly to them, or does it go through the local grocery store, or how is it billed?
Okay, it goes through the local grocery store, so they get the sale.
Yeah,
and that's how we saw the increase in sales. Ordinarily, an institution like a school or a hospital, they will have a 1-year contract minimum with what's called a food service distributor. And they'll estimate the school, let's say a school will estimate what they want to buy for the year. And then they'll have it bid by the food service distributors. And the winning bid then will supply, let's say, 85–90% of what they need for a year. The other 10 to 15%, they'll actually buy locally from the grocery store. And then the store will fill that school. Okay. Good question.
Yeah, one other question on the larger grocery stores or even the smaller grocery stores. You said it's usually a multi-year contract.
Yeah,
Is that something they usually can't break? Is that 3 years, 5 years? Is that?
if you want to break the contract, you usually have to pay something. So initially, to get you on board, a lot of, depends on the distributor, but they can offer, better terms, payment terms, or so much inventory, or some other, discounted services to get you in the door to sign the contract. But then if you decide to bail out of your third year on your fifth 5-year contract, you have to pay some of that back. So that's why a lot of stores won't do that, because they don't want to pay that fee. But here's all the distributors that drive up and down this, right on mine on here, every day. There's a lot of these folks. Here's the 4 retail grocery, they deliver to grocery stores. And they generally don't compete directly with what's called food service distributors. The food service distributors will deliver product to institutions. And in general, these products are in, let's say, larger bulk quantities. Like this, you can buy a case of pasta, 12 count, 1 pound box, 1 pound boxes in a box. Here, it'll probably be 144 because the school or the institution will have need larger quantities. So a little bit different inventory. Here we have C-store especially, and these are convenience store distribution, but they also deliver to grocery stores. And especially like, let's say, let's pick Henry's Foods. They're big in delivering tobacco products. So a grocery store does not have to limit buying from these guys. They can also buy a lot of stuff from these guys, some specialty things like pop and water and tobacco items, things like that. So the grocery stores, they can buy from a variety of them. A lot of the smaller stores in the state that don't meet the minimums will buy from these, but these prices are quite a bit higher. So they, it's kind of a blind. Then if prices are higher, maybe your local folks won't buy from you. They'll think, well, I'll just go to line on, go to Walmart or whatever. Yes, John.
And don't you also have a different inventory situation? You've got 30,000 SKUs.
Yeah.
The full line. How many SKUs might you have for a C-store?
Yeah, for these guys would have a lot less. And in fact, some of these like Sunrise and OK Distributing in Badland, they might only have you know, a couple hundred products that they distribute. So.
I see you don't have a Walmart listed up there.
Well, that's a different animal.
Okay, so that's that. And then that does a large grocery, obviously a large grocery, they're in the Atlantic region, they're large in Botano, they've got a couple different spots.
Yep, they're the largest in the United States. Yeah, by far.
And they handle their own stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why they wouldn't use any of these guys.
Yeah, one of our clients is a pasta company down in Texas, and they built their pasta company right next to the Walmart warehouse. So they just shoot it over there. Yeah, Walmart is the big gorilla in the room. So, but we think that the hub and spoke model, you know, reduces prices, can reduce prices, and can compete with instead of having to run the Walmart. Next slide. So here's some North Dakota-based direct store delivery. We call them direct store delivery, because those trucks will stop, and in fact, in many cases, they'll stop at a store and they won't have what the store wants, but they'll go find it and they'll deliver it. So it's a little service oriented, but you can see these are North Dakota based, smaller distributors. And they kind of stay in their own lane with what they're what products they have to distribute. Okay, next slide. Hopefully I'm not running through these too fast. So we're going to talk about several different surveys that were conducted. The first survey we're going to talk about is the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives survey of grocery stores in this region. In a 75-mile radius, they were 33. There were like a little over 30 stores were contacted, and 18 of those returned the survey, so at a 54% return rate, which was pretty good. And we got a lot of information from those folks. Next slide. So here's some of the things we wanted to find out. And in the red are the primary questions that we wanted to ask. Who are you? Where are you located? Who is your primary grocery distributor? That's really important to know. Who are your other distributors? What's your satisfaction level with the primary grocery distributor? This was really interesting. The stores really like their distributors in general. We didn't find hardly anybody that was cranky about their distributor. Primary, when I say primary, it's that broad-based grocery distributor. Here's the other one, probably the most important question. What is your interest in cooperating with other grocers? And then we had a phrase on the end of it, you know, to improve your distribution and product selection and whatnot. Then we also asked them, do you have extra dry, refrigerated, frozen, storage space? And the reason we asked that is, can they become a hub store? And then what is your interest in the distribution facility? Ellen shows you that diagram of a minot-based distribution facility. And John will talk in depth about that. That's his expertise, is building warehouses. But what's your interest in participating in that? And we wanted to know what their weekly sales volume is. But the two most important things, who's your primary grocery distributor? And what's your interest in cooperating with other grocers? And knowing those two things, we can kind of formulate a strategy. Next slide. So here's who their major distributors are, the broadline distributors. The UNFI, out of the 18, 7 of those grocers that returned were UNFI distributor. And 6 of those 7 said they were interested in collaborating. Pretty interesting. Spartan Nash, they're out of Fargo too. UNFI's got a warehouse in Fargo. They used to have one in Bismarck, but they shut that one down and consolidated it into Fargo. Spartan Nash has one in Fargo. Associated Wholesale Grocers is out of Nebraska. And Mason Brothers is out of Wadena, Minnesota. But Spartan Nash, 9 of the grocers that out of the 18 were surveyed, only 1 was interested in collaborating. That's interesting. Yes, Brian.
There was a question on the chat here. Just wondering, what would they benefit from? They had a contract with UNFI. What would be the benefits to the grocery store?
They all have their different pitch. You know, the broad line, they're very similar. They're very similar to each other because they watch each other and they compete with each other. It could be the product mix. It could be the personality of the salesperson, the district manager. That plays into this a lot. Customer service. So it might be they just like the attention by UNFI over, let's say, Spartan Nash. It's just kind of luck of the draw. And if you look at North Dakota, they're almost equally split up. between Unified and Spartan Nash. It's really interesting how that's, they're almost even Steven. Associated Wholesale Grocers, they are a co-op. This one, they have 12,000 stores, something like that. That are members. And the members each year get a 2 or 3% rebate on their sales. They're growing like crazy, this co-op. And they want to move more into this region and into Montana. But they're heavy duty in Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, all of that area down there. But they're, yeah,
And was that one that you and I talked to, and they just opened up a facility in St. Paul?
yes,
Right?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, St. Cloud, yeah. And then they're also building a new, major, frozen refrigerated warehouse right next to them. So, anyway, they're pretty impressive, but they have one retail grocer that was surveyed, but was not interested in collaboration. And then Mason Brothers out of Wadena, one retail grocer surveyed, and that person was interested in collaborating.
So Neil,
Yeah.
there's another question. Would Spartan Nash be considered probably the most expensive distributor?
No.
Okay.
No, they, depends on what services you select. If you're a grocer and you don't need that much services and you can do your own advertising and whatnot. It just depends on what you want for services. But they're pretty even, you know. Of course, some products are more expensive than others. Depends on your product mix. Some stores say that Spartan Nash is a lot cheaper, but their product mix is different from UNFI and vice versa. So, yeah.
I can add to that, by relating to the conversation I recently had with some grocers in another state,
Yeah,
that had recent experience both with UNFI and with Associated Wholesale Grocers. It's a family-owned chain. They've got about 8 or 9 locations in Mississippi. They have been that were Associated Wholesale Grocers on the expectation that they're. And in fact, they do this now. If they purchase from AWG, their costs ended up being higher.
yeah, you don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah, it all depends on services and product mix. UNFI is more into the health food side, you might say. Spartan Nash is more into the basics. And depends on what your store sells. So. Next, yeah, next slide. Okay, so just to go back again, out of the 18 stores that were surveyed, 9 of them said that yes, they'd be interested in collaborating. 8 said no, and 1 did not respond. Then also, is there a north central, in other words, Minot warehouse distribution food processing facility needed? Out of the 18, 7 said yes. So, next slide. So if we're getting to the point where I can say what, you know, with all this information, what does that mean? So we're going to get to what does it mean here pretty quick. Sure.
When this survey was taken, it was before or after they closed the Bismarck warehouse?
Just before,
Okay.
yeah, just before. And the buildings warehouse too.
Yeah.
We was part of that shutdown.
Yeah.
We got a grocery store in Park Lake.
Right, right,
I mean, it messed up, like,
yeah,
we lost money.
yeah,
You can't get it back, you can't.
right,
Yeah.
right,
So
right.
very upset.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
But we did.
Oh, damaged food,
No, well,
service is, I'll
yeah.
have you continue.
Okay.
I'll get upset.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah. I have no dog in the fight, you know, this is, it is what it is.
You know, we just gotta adapt and overcome. move on.
Yeah.
And hopefully this is a good outcome for us.
Yeah, okay. So, out of the grocery analysis that we did, they utilize full line distributors, but 56%, in other words, I think 10 of the stores of the 18 sell local foods. And they listed what they were, and they were like, when they were in season, like vegetables primarily, honey, some meats, things like that. And out of the rest of them, the other 44%, 80% of those said, yeah, we'd like to sell local foods. We just can't get them. So that's a good sign that all of the grocers that would respond pretty much are interested in local foods. Next slide. Okay. This is the RAD co-op that we talked about, Walsh County. And this, I just for demonstration purposes, remember those 6 stores that are 7 stores that were unified stores that are very interested in collaborating. They're 2 clusters, one right here and right up there. So there are kind of 2 clusters, and just to show you what they are, they're in the blue. The green were Spartan Nash stores, and they're a little more distributed. And then we have one AWG store right there. That's a Cashwise, by the way. And then a Mason Brothers store right here in St. Michael. So just shows you the kind of the distribution of the folks that we surveyed. Now, not that it would happen, but if these folks in the clusters were interested, they could look at this model and maybe do something. And well, it doesn't matter who they're, even though they're unified, if they decided to switch distributors, they could still do the same thing. So, anyway, clusters, that's really important. And why clusters? Because then you have less miles to distribute product. And it'll be much more efficient to do that. Okay.
Neil, can you, part of me just kind of fills it in. The ones that we didn't get surveys from, they were spread all over north, southeast, west, mine as well. There wasn't like one area that just, we didn't get responses from.
No, they were just scattered all over the place, yeah.
And the other thing I would say is some of them just told us not interested, so then they weren't willing to complete the survey. So I think we pretty well got responses from everyone. We just maybe didn't get a survey from everyone,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's like 13 others, but they're just kind of scattered and all that. Weren't interested. Okay, next slide. So this just tells you what the sales volume was roughly. Unify probably had smaller stores than Spartan Nash. Spartan Nash had a few more larger stores. This is weekly sales. Next slide. So anyway, if for example, the RAD co-op in Walsh County, what they're basically are is a redistribution service cooperative. The cooperative does not own groceries. What the cooperative does, delivers groceries. It's a service, transportation service. And it's, I would say very economical to operate. And it's by not having to buy product, it doesn't need a whole lot of cash up front. So the way it works in Walsh County is each store will order from its primary distributor once a week. And they'll place their orders. And the distributor uses all that co-op, that grouping as one store, so they can share services and reduce the cost that way. So when the product arrives, each store will have its own separate path. It's already segregated, so you don't have to do that at the hub store. And then so the hub store uses its employee, pick it up and put it in the truck, and then they go through the rounds and distribute their product. And the smaller stores pay a fee to the hub store for doing that. And they also charge a fee to the schools or healthcare, like $60 a drop, in order to get compensated for that drop. And they're delighted to do that.
Look at this fanciness in here.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
And it,
The fun of a husband.
yeah, voices. Anyway,
That was
and
marijuana
cost-
you were smelling on that person.
costs them more money than $60 to go and pick up groceries once a week. So they're happy to do it. The members, all those stores, they're each a member and they own the cooperative. Each member gets one vote. They're kind of on their own little board of directors. And they control its activities. And they provide that specialized service in distributing groceries. Okay, next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
When you talk about the ordering from the primary supplier, that was full cases that they're ordering.
Right.
And if they want, partial case products, they're ordering directly off the shelves of the hub store at wholesale price with a small markup. You're able to access, a greater variety and not have to buy full cases and carry that inventory.
So a broadline distributor, you can buy a 24-count case of Campbell's mushroom soup, but it might take you 2 years to sell it. So in this hub model, that smaller store can order 3 cans from the hub store and be way dollars ahead, not tying up all their dollars in inventory.
They place that order 2 days in advance, so if
Right.
the hub store doesn't have enough inventory in stock, then they place an order for another case. They can control their inventory that way.
And they communicate very well together, all those stores.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Yeah, it's really important. Okay. So what we found out with this co-op development, it requires vision and leadership. The folks in all the stores got together and they all contributed. Requires some investment in equipment, investment in working capital. Just like bankers always said, there are 3 things you need for a successful business: management, management, management. So that's the key. And it requires some labor, and the hub store supplies that and gets reimbursed for it. Requires some inventory space. And then what Lori just pointed out was teamwork and communication. They talk to each other a lot. Okay, next slide.
Neil?
Yeah.
There's a question, do you think that the stores who said they weren't interested in cooperating may change their minds? They see or hear more about proof of concept?
I think so, yeah. And it's, sending out just a paper survey. You don't know if they just got through, getting yelled at by somebody in their store. So you don't know. But personally, I think face-to-face works the best to get information. So the benefits of this co-op, that no minimum volume requirements for the smaller stores, that's a big deal. Because then they don't have this fear of getting dropped by the distributors. They can identify better deals and promotions. What happens is the stores, when they talk to each other, Cindy may call up and tell Diana, I just saw that such and such was on, buy one case and get another one free or something like that. So they talk to each other. And what Lori said, they can split cases for better inventory control. nothing worse than buying product, having sit on the shelf for a long time. That's just like laying dollar bills there. Just, it's very expensive to carry too much inventory. And then they can aggregate product from multi-distributors. That co-op, that rag co-op, they also buy Frito-Lay chips. They buy pop, and they can aggregate that there too. They don't just have to do the broadline stuff. And if you're a small store and you're buying Frito-Lay, you have to buy it through UPS. Believe it or not. You can about imagine what the chips look like when they get to the store. You know, it's dust. So now they can buy directly from the major distributor, bring it into the hub and then split it up. So, reduce your freight charges. They can share some management distribution fees. That broadline distributor maybe does not need to charge each store the fee, but they can share that fee and reduce their costs. Improves their gross margins. Then they can coordinate the local school and healthcare sales. Support food lockers and they distribute their products made in the grocery store to member stores. So a couple of stores, one store does bakery, another store does, you know, sausage. Then that gets and another store provides potatoes. And it gets backhauled and distributed. So it's a very interesting model. Yeah.
And I think more can be said about the third and bottom, bullet, coordinate local school and healthcare sales for two reasons. One, I think it's a unique situation for North Dakota. That, you know, the hospital or schools would look to their local grocer for some kind of related goods. And two, if you remember that one of the very first slides when you showed the four grocery distributors, right? The next column was those distributors like Cisco and Sodexo that go after that institutional market. What you're talking about is taking their business away and putting it into the hands of North Dakota businesses.
Yeah, local business, yeah. Oh, yes, Brian.
There's another question here. How would this improve local food distribution? And local growers / producers would sell to the redistribution centers? Is a question. Would the local producers do that?
Great. I was just going to talk about that.
I'm glad.
I thought you believe that. But, no, that's true. So why we're talking about a grocery hub to the start of this is that is probably the start of the regional strategy. If you have a regional distribution, grocery hub and spokes, that service can expand into local food production distribution. In other words, if a local food producers, whether they're vegetable or meat or whatever, that truck isn't used every day. That truck can be used for other services. And the primary cost is covered by grocery distribution, but then it can also be used for local food distribution. So we're thinking that maybe phase 2 is use these hub services for local food distribution. Yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier that most likely the cooperative would be a redistribution service.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't own the groceries.
Right.
So that local food grower wouldn't sell to the co-op, they would sell to marketplace, Development Fresh Foods. They would sell direct to the grocery store, direct. And then they would just use the hub in some way. Maybe there'd be a fee for them to $10 to take my stuff, put it in there and deliver it to
Exactly.
whatever that fee is.
Ellen, could I call on you to talk about the Montana? They kind of do that, don't they?
Sure, I think we're in the early stages of exploring various models of local food hubs and examining those that have some staying power and that look like they're, you know, operationally sustainable. But one that Brian arranged a great call for us with last week was the Western Montana Growers Cooperative. And so I encourage everybody interested in the local foods movement to take a look at that. And it's, I think, one that we can connect with more deeply, but essentially it's a producer only cooperative and just has an upcharge essentially for the transportation to either pick it up from the farm or an aggregated place and then get it to the customer, and 50% of which are grocery stores, about 30% restaurants, and about 20% institutions. So it's, definitely a concept that we want to take a closer look at for anyone who's interested in delving into that with us.
Yep, so it's being done there as a, with the local food producers. But our thought here is that, there may not be enough volume to replicate something like that at this time. So if there's a redistribution service available that's currently going to grocery stores, then the local food producers could probably jump on with that and utilize that service to start until they get to the point where they can do their own distribution, get their volume up. So next slide. I'm running late, so I'm gonna have to cruise through these. This is a kind of the model that was used at Rad Co-op. They had a source of funds. They got some grant funds. The co-op members each chipped in about $500. They got $5,000 worth of advertising on their truck per year. They charged delivery fee to grocery stores and schools. So that's their source of funds. They use their funds to buy some co-op development, legal fees and whatnot, refrigerated truck. This is our thought is that any hub store that would be interested in being a hub would probably need some refrigerator and freezer upgrades in order to expand that. Software and computers, carts and containers, labor, fuel, storage fees, and then contingency. And in the next slide, yeah, I'll get to it. But we'll see if it makes economic sense. So if the folks in this room or any grocers are interested in taking a look at the process, it would be recommended that there be a meeting scheduled with the cooperating grocers and primary distributors to sit down and say, okay, what can we do? The distributors, by the way, the broadline distributors are very aware of this. They know exactly what's taking place. So it's not a mystery to them. And I've had more than one say that this may be the future of our business because we can't stop everyone. And if there's a redistribution, that might be the model for our new business. So at the meeting, analyze the invoices of current freight and service fees by the grocers to the distributor. Take a look at all those costs. And then determine the freight savings that would take place if you had a single delivery form. It's just mathematics. And then determine the service fees that would be shared by the grocers instead of individually get dinged for all the service fees. And then apply those cost savings into a business model. Okay, next slide. Now we'll get to the meat. So, like in the case of Rad, they get a weekly delivery fee and a weekly advertising fee. I just took the 5,000 divided by 50 weeks. And they're getting about $700 a week in revenue, and their operating cost is about $650. So it's kind of a break even, but it's kind of a good service for them. It's a co-op. If they make any money at the end of the year, it goes to the members. So the grant funding expenditures, like I said, the co-op development fee, refrigerated truck, refrigerator, freezer, software, carts, and etc. And then this actually just talks about the cost per week that ends up over here. So with regard to like RAD, if there was and I did run the numbers for that cluster of UNFI stores with mileage and all of that, it'd be very similar to this. So it would be feasible to do. Okay. Next slide. Now we're going to switch. Okay. We're going to switch. We're going to talk about local foods. We did some local food surveys. Brian did a beef survey. And Stephanie, where are you, Stephanie? There she is. Stephanie did a really good local food producer survey. And so we'll run through that really quick, those surveys. Plus, there was an interview with Trinity Health and the Minot school system. And just to get a feel for what the health and the school system feels about what's going on here. So, next slide. Okay. Now, remember the 18 grocers that we surveyed at the beginning? Remember I said that 9 of them said that they sell locally grown food. And if the 7 that said no, actually 4 of them said yes, they're interested. So there's opportunity in grocery. Next slide. Okay. Here's Stephanie down here on our organization farms. She did a statewide 100-mile radius of mileage. She actually did a statewide. And she was kind enough to peel the numbers out for the 100-mile. I know it was a lot of work, and I appreciate it very much. Anyway, it ended up with 29 respondents, which is really good for this region. And there were 17 vegetable producers, 10 fruit, and a lot of these are not just vegetable, but they do other stuff too. 10 said they do fruit, 11 herbs, 8 eggs, 3 dairy, 9 meat, and 11 of them do their value added. In other words, they take their commodity and add value to it, make something additional. Then non-food products for them, cut flowers for, really nice, sort of a lot of data there. Okay, next one. So this is how much acres that these folks did that reported with regard to vegetable and fruit production. A couple of them were pretty big, 41 to 60 acres, 21 to 40, and so on. This is most common, 2 to 5, half to 1 acre. Okay, next slide. Here's where the respondents were. Notice they're almost right around Highway 2 and above, which is really interesting. Now, this was kind of a guess where they located, but it's pretty close. So the dark star were the folks that were interested in collaborating with each other with a blogger. So there are a lot of them. And the green star said they were kind of interested, somewhat interested, but they needed more information. So there are a lot of them that are interested in collaborating with something. Okay, next one. Okay, so the ones who are interested in collaborating, 64% said they were very interested, and 32% were somewhat interested, and only 4% said no. That is really interesting. So you got a collaborative bunch of local food producers that are interested in doing something. Next. Okay. Then we asked, or Stephanie asked, what was the supply versus demand? And they said there's far more demand, right here, 18%, far more demand than supply, somewhat more demand than supply, 40%. 11 said, was it equal? 22% some more supply than demand, and only 7% said far more supply. What that tells me is that there's opportunity out there. There's not enough supply, there's more demand. And other parts of the survey were that almost all of them are looking to expand in some fashion. Next slide. Yeah, this is the expansion. The 44% said that they, yes, indeed, they're looking at expanding. And another 44%, almost 90%, but there are some barriers that they're encountering that they'd like to overcome. And instead, they found out what the barriers were. That's the next slide, I think. Nope, not that. We're getting to it. There you go. Here's the barriers. Logistics, delivery of products available at cost of suitable land. Cost of labor was a big one that people said, right? And then cost of input or supplies, production equipment, access to processing facility. This is another one that could feed into a processing center. Access to infrastructure for season extension, and lack of knowledge and skills. And a lot of them, several of them said they really wanted more education as to food production and market. Lack of capital was, it's interesting, only 3 of them mentioned lack of capital. If you look at any other type of business, that's usually the top one. Right, John? Lack of capital, yeah. Excessive regulations only by 2. So that was good to identify. Those are all, you can mitigate all of those with certain activities. So next slide. Okay. This is which ones wanted a pickup delivery service? 15 out of 29 said yes. 7 out of another 7 said they need more info, but they were interested. And then only and then another 7 did not reply. But interested in pickup delivery, yes?
No, nobody said no.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Next slide. Now we're cruising through these pretty quick, but if anybody has any other questions. So we're still talking about local delivery, Stephanie survey. 25 out of 29 use their personal vehicles. And 5 out of 29 have refrigerated. And 16 out of 29 have their buyers pick up their products. So using your personal vehicles, there's that's why I think a lot of them said they'd be interested in collaborating with some sort of a delivery mechanism. Okay, next slide. Which ones were interested in the food hub ownership? And here we go. 22% said yes. 27% said perhaps. 27% said need info. And only about a quarter of them said no. So that's pretty positive as well, I think. Next slide. So the volume that the respondents supplied. Vegetables about 67,000 pounds. Processed and value-added foods, that it ended up being way over 50,000 pounds. 14 responses.
Yeah, was that a total or per response?
Pardon?
That 20 responses, they produced 67.
It's aggregate total, yeah. And then the meat, there were 13 responses. And eggs, 14,000 dozen. Dairy, 4,600 gallons. So if you look at the volume here at this point is probably not enough to justify its own distribution system. But it probably is enough if they contract with somebody like a grocery hub to distribute to start. And then once you add more local growers on, then they would morph over to do what the Montana people did, to get their own vehicles and warehouse. And I think Ellen said that they have several warehouses, but they lease them, right?
Okay.
And then they have 7 trucks in Montana. Yeah, but they grew into it. It took them a long time to grow it.
Neil, I think you had a comparison to like truckloads on this
Yeah.
volume, if that would help us to put our arms around how much
This
this
is
is.
about 2 trucks. And depending on this, you know, each truck is about 40,000 pounds. So, it could be a couple of trucks. This would be a couple of trucks, semis I'm talking about. Eggs, I don't know how you pack eggs, so I can't do anything there, but, I'd say there's probably, this aggregate is probably 8 to 10 semis going somewhere annually though, but that's a season. You know, that's compressed into 12 weeks or so.
You know, I guess from my viewpoint, I'm just not a grower,
Yep.
not a grocer, just looking at numbers and stuff. That's the big thing that we're gonna write, is we should don't produce, even if we produce a lot of stuff locally here for ourselves, we should don't produce enough for all the people that want to eat stuff.
That's perfect.
All the people in nursing homes and in schools.
Yep. The demand was way higher. Demand is way harder than supply. So how do you help these folks raise more when you distribute logically? So that's all we need you folks to help us to figure that out. So next slide.
There's a question online.
Sure.
Does the greenhouse in Montreal County factor into this?
No,
Partial.
nope. Okay. So here's the annual gross income of the, so it goes all the way from you know, smaller folks all the way up to, you know, over $100,000 a year in sales. So it's just kind of a wide range of people. Okay, next one. Brian did a meat survey, local producers for meat. And a lot of these, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 7 meat producers, 6 of them said they would want to collaborate, join a have their own distribution of some sort, or to contract with the distribution. That's really good for on the meat side. Next slide. Okay, but they have different methods of inspection. So it's all over the map here. Some custom exempt state processing slaughter, some federal processing and slaughter. So you had a wide smattering of different types of meat production. That's really interesting to find that out. Next slide. So here's where they're located, the folks that were surveyed. And they're kind of spread out. So I think their distribution would be a lot of miles. So, but if there's a service, let's just say a service that was right around here that they could contract with, they could probably scoot out here to get things done. Next slide. So, Minot Public Schools, there was a interview with them on September 30th. They use, like, remember I said the schools contract on an annual basis with a food service distributor. In this case, it's Cashwa. They're out of Seattle, but have a warehouse in Fargo. But they are interested in purchasing produce from local suppliers. And the variety, they buy a variety of produce. And they currently purchase box beef cuts, hamburger, pork, chicken, turkey. But they are interested in buying local meat. And they're currently buying some from a Montana company called Legendary Steaks.
They're
So-
in Napoleon, I think.
Huh?
I believe they're in Napoleon.
Yeah, they are,
Legendary Steaks.
yeah, they are there
Yeah.
too, yeah.
On your distribution questions and your, was it a yes or no, or did you ask any like ability to pay? Did you like, most people would say yes, yeah, we want a distributor, yeah, well, did you ask them like, would you be willing to pay this much for it? Or, that type of thing?
Well, I think the way it was phrased, it was if they owned the distribution arm,
Okay,
yeah.
so there was no like cost
No.
questions?
No. It would be their local ownership. So, and anyway, so they're interested in producing vegetable or buying vegetable, fruit, meat, dairy, honey, local producers. And I think it's just a matter of having a meeting and saying, okay, you're getting ready for your annual purchase. How much of that can this group supply? Next slide. And here was with Trinity Health, very similar. They buy from a couple different primary distributors, U.S. Food Service and Cashwell. They're interested in produce, they're interested in meat, dairy, eggs, and cheeses, local producers. So that was a good sign. Next slide. So, and then Brian did checked on 4 different schools, and only one of the schools purchased local dairy products, but 3 out of the 4 of those schools were interested in purchasing local vegetables, fruit, and meats. He checked with 4 different restaurants, and none of the restaurants purchased local food at present. 1 was interested in purchasing local vegetables, meat, and eggs. 1 was interested in purchasing local meats, and 1 was interested in purchasing local prepared foods. So, in other words, it's kind of a communication thing. They probably don't even know the stuff's available until somebody's focused.
Another thing, Neil, that I think was interesting on the restaurant conversations, because I sat in on a few of those,
Yeah.
Was that there was an appetite for purchasing local foods if they knew how long, if they could then showcase it in a different way on their restaurant menu.
Sure.
It wasn't going to be, and that would probably be a higher cost, but then people locally would say, I will pay that extra cost because I know that it came from Bessie down the street.
Right.
So I'm fine with that. But that's hard to have that conversation. Then you gotta buy in certain quantities, then they want certain cuts, and then that becomes much more difficult to just say, I'll take it all.
Right.
Those are very different conversations.
Sure. That's a good point. Next slide. So, on the local foods recommendations, Stephanie, you're going to be doing a 2025 Farms Local survey with in conjunction with the rural electrics, and you're going to find out products, location, volume, distribution, collaboration, production, and expand that database. So, then there's a need to design and execute a local foods buyer survey with more retailers, schools, restaurants, healthcare, eating programs. Get more buy-in from those groups. And then to convene a local groups advocacy group planning meeting. And that's all you folks here. Folks that are interested in grocery distribution and local foods distribution to get together and frequently meet and discuss opportunities. And then to analyze any plans that come out of those meetings and select a course of action. Okay, next slide. So what I was talking about here is a phase 1, identify grocery distribution, a hub. Phase 2 would be identifying local foods distribution, which would probably initially use the grocery hub services for distribution and eventually get into their own. And then finally, once these are up running very well, then get into the multi-purpose facility in Minot to make sure it cash flows, where that facility would be a distribution center for local foods and grocery. It would have probably a local foods retail store, a commercial kitchen, food production and distribution, a training center, and preferably an anchor tenant, somebody that can go in there initially and get things set up. So it goes in phases. You got to walk before you run, type thing. So it's just something to think about. It's kind of a template. Next. So, questions on that? Yes, right.
Let's go make a comment on the restaurant survey and that.
Yeah.
We spent, I almost think it was 250 to 300 surveys, school restaurants.
Right.
Not very little back, but what we did hear though from the restaurants is year round.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
some of the restaurants, if we could buy 50%, if our menu was 50% local, we would do that. But we would like to have it year round. So that's always a struggle. How do you provide some of the produce and that year round?
True.
Unless you process it, but still, you're still limited.
Right.
So that's just a comment on that. So.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. Yep. Yes.
Has there been any thought into what role the local electric or telephone co-ops can play in this to assist in this, or?
They're a planning function, aren't you?
Well, and I think you're the eyes and the ears and the connection, and so as we get information out about the study work that's taken place so far, and then as we talk about what the next steps are, which so we're going to circulate some sign-up sheets. We would like to invite anyone who's willing to participate on any subset of this, from the rural grocery aspect to vegetable or produce growers and meat processors, are just a few of the subsets that we thought we might be able to start coalescing and doing some work around to share that information with those in the areas you serve, and the opportunity to get involved, I think. So I think, just information sharing and making sure, it really is difficult to just send out surveys by mail or email and get responses. It really does take that phone call and that in-person conversation. And so I think when we can identify somebody who's interested, and we can arrange that opportunity for an in-person visit too. So I think if you know of people that are interested in this kind of work or initiative in the communities that you serve, then we would be glad to have that in-person or online meeting or whatever form that takes. So Donnie.
Phase 1 and 2, the second item was secure funding. Any plans for approach the legislature on for those types of things? Anything looking?
I think, can we put that in the parking lot and circle back to that?
Yeah.
So we have a few people queued up to give some reflections and comments right now. So I want to be respectful of their time. We have Mark Watney with the Farmers Union online, who's going to